Ora bem, estamos cá hoje outra vez. Fizemos um à tarde que não estava previsto, visto que a mensagem era importante. Depois descobriu-se que uma das grandes lojas nos Estados Unidos de vendas de material eletrónico estava a vender gráficas 5090 adulteradas, entre aspas, na próprio fabricante, neste caso a Zotac. Vejam o vídeo. Portanto, esse vídeo não era previsto, mas pronto, teve que ser feito, porque acho que era uma mensagem importante. Ok? O de agora, o que vamos fazer é um pequeno resumo do próprio Gamers Nexus. Vídeo que ele fez, não é este aqui, vídeo que ele fez sobre a COMPUTEX, um resumo alargado e mais rápido, e depois vou fazer mais por tópicos, como é normal. Ok? Vamos.
Hardware news is up now, and this one is a special episode because we're rolling in a bunch of the extra coverage from COMPUTEX, which was the last.
Ok.
So, to talk about in this video, where they didn't make their own standalone videos, so that includes some clips that we shot on site and some where we just went and
E depois vou ver vídeos separados, ok? Vou tentar juntar temas para a semana.
98% of its keynote.
NVIDIA, prontos. Só está focado em inteligência artificial. É aquilo que lhes dá dinheiro. Tudo bem.
We've condensed that into just a hardware news thing. InWin has a case that can be activated via wand, and there's new supply concerns with hard drives, NVMe drives, and just storage in general facing the
Vai falar aqui.
Uprising is really not the right word.
Não interessa muito.
First of all, I love going to Taiwan. It is my favorite place to go, and for COMPUTEX, super fun. So we had more engineering discussions than we've.
Esta caixa já eu tinha falado há uns tempos.
Different booths. And then we also have some interviews coming up. So really excited to share all that because I learned a lot talking to some of the people who work at the companies in engineering or CTO type roles, things like that. There's one interesting one where
Thermaltake,
where the first time ever had their CEO go on camera with a Western media outlet, so that was us, and we talked about some of their strategy. And it was the shortest, simplest interview. The guy gives
eles não estão habituados.
Sometimes you get a couple sentences, but they're all very straightforward and very plain in a good way. I mean, it immediately communicates what he's trying to communicate. But that's in the Thermalright video. And then we also had Jameson from Lian Li, the CEO of Lian Li, on.
Lian Li também vou mostrar muitos vídeos.
Tenzin, talking about fan design, Noctua's Jacob.
Umas caixas e uns IOs porreiros. Ventoinhas também, acho eu.
For two separate technical discussions. And a lot of other people from the industry joined to talk about technicals. So that was cool. It certainly is.
Vamos passar para a frente mais rápido.
Several booths after we published.
Agradeço que vocês depois vão ao site ver o vídeo dele.
So you know, if you want to talk to our engineers on
Gamers Nexus merece.
You can just do it. And I was kind of like, wow, that's exactly how it should be, but somehow very refreshing. And so we did that. Anyway, love the show. We have a post on Patreon about how we pack for it and the gear we use. If you're curious about any of that, just kind of like, hey, here's the stuff we use. And we also have a special video coming up featuring Paul from Paul's Hardware, Wendell from Level 1 Techs, and Labby from Unico's Hardware, which is a local Taiwan publication, media publication. And we worked with all three of them to go through different tech malls, secondhand computer stores, recycling places where they strip the components and figure out how to distribute them. And to new and then me with them. And
vamos aqui mais para a frente.
We did that math, and the 2%, 50-60 basically. As usual, the keynote was delivered by CEO Jensen Huang. Most of the time was spent on AI and subsequent fields. We're going to go.
Eu acho que os 2% até foi muito.
Jensen Huang is unbelievably famous and well known in Taiwan.
Mas eu tenho que fazer uma data de memes para este gajo.
I want like a bakery where everyone there is a little bit older and they don't really know a whole lot about technology from what they were telling me.
Não.
But they all
Toda a gente conhece o Jensen, não é?
asking what we thought of the keynote. And
ele veio de baixo.
Which is like I've heard that.
Não esqueça que o Gamer Nexus consegue falar algum alemão e chinês.
Here's what Jensen said.
And then, of course, I promise I'll talk about AI.
And Juan, of course, also provided a few clips that we can't promise not to revisit.
Who doesn't want that? I want that. Can you imagine one of those little ones or a few of them running around the house, chasing your dogs?
Foi uma vergonha esta apresentação.
No matter the modality, every single model that we know of in the world, every application that we know of should run on this. In fact, even Crisis works on here. Okay, so anybody who's a...
Ninguém se riu. Ixi, Jesus.
There's no GeForce gamer in the room.
Ficaste mal. Pois, então, quer dizer, estás só a falar de inteligência artificial e depois queres que apareça um gajo aí que sabe muito trabalhar. Que tenha um tocado na GeForce. Que vergonha.
It gives me tremendous joy if you just...
É esta a empresa líder do mercado.
G4 side of the keynote first, because it's the easiest to cover. Jensen Huang entered the stage holding an Asus RTX 5060, as well as a 5060 powered MSI laptop. Huang described how the 5060 is able to achieve such masterful performance, claiming,
Right now, what you're seeing is every single pixel is ray traced. How is that possible that we're able to simulate photon and deliver this kind of frame rate at this resolution? Well, the reason for that is artificial intelligence. We're only rendering 1 out of 10 pixels. So every pixel that you see, only
Maravilha.
1 out of 10 is actually computed.
Para uma imagem parada, uma maravilha.
AI guessed. Does that make any sense? And it's perfect.
Jesus, ninguém fala.
It's completely perfect. It guessed it perfectly. Of course, the technology is called DLSS, neural rendering.
and after 2 entire minutes talking about GeForce, Jensen Huang realized
GeForce brought AI to the world. Now AI came back and revolutionized GeForce.
and moved on, stating,
You know, when you're CEO, you have many children.
and like children, he has favorites, and GeForce isn't one of them.
And GeForce brought us here. And now all of our keynotes is 90% not GeForce. But it's not because we don't love GeForce.
Jesus.
RTX 50 series just had its most successful launch ever.
We appreciate the feigned
Que
self-awareness.
vergonha.
We're all clear on the math here. 2 minutes out of a 100-minute keynote, approximately, is actually closer to 98% not GeForce, not 90% not GeForce. Doesn't sound like a big difference, but when you've only got 10 percentage points left to play with, it kind of is. Now, as far as calling the RTX 50 series NVIDIA's most successful launch ever, maybe by whatever their metrics are, maybe by sales, but we would definitely have to disagree based on how it's gone the last several months. Now, NVIDIA also announced its RTX Pro 6000 servers and GPUs. The GPUs are already known, but each RTX Pro 6000 Blackwell Server Edition GPU will have 4 petaflops of
Este é para trabalho.
96 gigabytes of GDDR7, 1.6 terabyte per second memory bandwidth.
Custa uma pequena fortuna.
8 of these GPUs, and each RTX Pro server rack
A AMD também apresentou.
amounting to 32 GPUs per server rack by our count. One entire RTX Pro server rack consists of 32 RTX Pro 6000 GPUs, 120 petaflops of claimed AI FP4 performance,
Isto é o valor de um PIB.
51 terabytes per second memory bandwidth, and 256 encoders and decoders. Jensen Huang announced,
Our RTX Pro server is in volume production across all of our partners in the industry. This is likely the largest go-to market of any system we have ever taken to market.
as it relates to robotics, the company announced the Jensen Thor.
Wait for it. Wait for it.
Oh no, wait, sorry, that's Jetson.
Jesus.
Jetson Thor. This is a robotics processor that just started production. Next, Jensen shared that Groot N1.5 is now open source, and finally announced Groot Dreams, which is a way to use AI, they say, to amplify the amount of data that was collected during human demonstration to train an AI model. Jensen Huang quickly moved on to discussing numerous AI-related endeavors. We'll run through a bullet list of what we felt were the most relevant announcements. NVIDIA redefined its company, again, calling itself, quote, an AI infrastructure company, unquote, that builds so-called AI factories. Jensen announced the GB300 Grace Blackwell superchip, an upgrade to the previous GB200 that uses the same architecture. He then explained how the GB300 NVL72 is assembled using 72 Blackwell GPUs. Huang announced the DGX Spark and DGX Station, two so-called personal AI computers. These are currently in production with partner models coming as well. Huang showcased the RTX Pro server and server.
Eles têm que fazer outra empresa.
And to wrap things up, NVIDIA announced what it calls Constellation, which is NVIDIA's newest office, and it's built in Shilin, Taiwan. In a news report by Digitimes, the next story, Seagate is cautioning against storage demand and needs for
Se eu passar à frente,
lacking in firm details on consumer cases at COMPUTEX. It had a lot of them. It just wasn't ready yet to talk about price, release dates. It's still kind of in the early phases of them.
esta caixa, muito, muito para a frente.
Finalized, but we still have some
Que ele vai apresentar aqui.
And one of them is a case that is driven by a wand. So we'll jump over to that. So InWind's latest creation is the Chronomancy, which is this case. This is, I guess you think of it as the signature series in the past, but this one is actually for the anniversary. It's the 40th.
Fantástico.
So first of all, down here, gigantic
Atenção, é só para demonstração.
stepper motor, as far as we understand it. So you can see we're hooked up here to power. And on the other side, there's a cog that'll turn in step with the gears to open and close it. And they've built this specific wand that uses IR and then basically gesture input to do opening, music, things like that, and we don't have a price. There's supposed to be something like maybe 40, 50 pieces that they're going to make. If you've seen in-win stuff in the past, in this...
Mas vão fazer produção.
All showpieces, like flourishes of design and creativity. We've shown them...
Esta, por exemplo, já tinha visto.
Mostly, it's just kind of cool. This still has a computer in it. So they've got this tower here where fan, SSD, and then we've got a block down here. And then the system itself is up top with a vertical GPU. And it looks like we've got standard ATX board up top, PCIe slots, in the very top of the case, a rear fan to pull air up and out, which is really the only way it can go through. There's a speaker.
Conceito engraçado, não?
Footage, so we don't open it again. And the paneling is stainless steel for this front plate, acrylic with laser engraving, and then a large aluminum base with 5 pillars to it, which...
Na volta de 45, 50 caixas destas que irão fazer.
One interesting thing with this is the process for manufacturing the acrylic plate here, where first it's a flat sheet, they laser engrave it, and then they bend it into the shape. And just like the other Signature Series cases we've seen in the past, or the non-anniversary ones, the manufacturing process for this, I think, is part of the showcase because this seems very difficult to make. So anyway, that's the Chronomancy. Excellent name, if nothing else. And we'll check out some of the more normal stuff. All right, so first one I want to show is...
Esta também é
it's like a double-decker.
tipo servidor.
Power supply in the back, it can support emergency failover. The top deck is the motherboard.
Muitas dessas coisas não foram faladas.
In the rear, there's 2 120s in the front, at least possible, and then one 120 in the bottom rear down here. There's also this handle. This is not a rack mount chassis, but it would be kind of like, I guess like a home, you can make a super nice NAS with this or something. And then this, so you got 2 hot swap, 2.5 inch in the front with a backplane for state of
Malta que trabalha muito.
And then the 5 1/4
Tem que ficar com backups, é importante.
For these drive case modules, giving another 4 drive mounts to the front of the case. The covalent was interesting, so they're taking feedback on this right now. This case isn't ready. This is a more standard case I'm used to covering.
Esta caixa está em desenvolvimento.
Glass side where this looks good. Unfortunately, it makes it so that these fans can't take air in from anywhere. The next best option would be the rear side panel perforating the lower down side of it to try and pull some air through the shroud, because otherwise it has to pull through the very bottom of the case that's so far away that you're going to need some really high pressure fans to do that. The case itself, though, has a little bit of the fractal torrent look going for it on the front. So this is plastic. They're probably going to stick with plastic. Part of the reasoning being, I mean, just material cost in general. The top, they're thinking aluminum, but otherwise, it is just a high airflow design, mesh front with the slats for some design element. We've seen that work really well with Fractal in the past for the Torrent. Side mounts, they've got 2 140s in there currently. It can do 3 120s alternatively. The rear is a 140, and then the top currently has a 360 rad in it.
Poderá ser interessante.
SSI EEB board support here with the cable management channels in the corner there. All right, so getting into stuff that we know pretty well.
Esta gostei.
It's called the Shift. This is a test bench. It is one of the most...
Fonte de 2500 watts. Esta caixa está muito, muito top.
But there's some small features like this. So this is just a lever to allow you to reposition and actuate the fan position and the radiator mounts, which as someone who's used a lot of test benches, that's actually pretty nice. So it can mount radiators on all sides. That's what these sort of looks
É
like.
o que ele vai fazer agora a seguir.
Currently it's set up with some 360s and 120s. There's been talk of potentially supporting 140s as well. But then the other thing that the case does is rotate. So I will have Andy help with that.
Muito, muito top.
And just
Top.
stand it up like that. And otherwise we'll move over to some of the standard cases. So this is the D-Light. Again, do I have
Muito top. Gostei muito.
It's got aluminum accents on the sides, and the front is really the only area to focus for us. So it's got this kind of like ridged front panel. Parts of this remind me of the DGX, but mostly just the color and the mesh. And then this case is it's the view, but it's...
Esta não gostei.
Now this, just to get the message out there, this is an intentional decision, so it's not a typo. The reason it's the view instead of the view is because this sort of looks like a W. But it's 3 panes of glass. This is a mirrored finish on the front. And then the back is a mesh pane with 2 tinted glass panes to it. This one's the Tactics.
Acho que vai se sujar muito.
This looks like the thing from Star Wars. We'll put it on the screen, and now we're demonetized. And then these are the Prism cases. So I did kind of like what they're doing with this.
É, essa está mais engraçada.
Air through the side, because you could technically pull some air through here, but they've perforated the top, which is good. I mean, this is nice to give access for the top fan, and then it just allows a nicer look where you're exposing more of that fan, and especially for people who are...
Odysee, o nome desta
That is it for this one. We'll jump over to the next story.
esta marca.
Be quiet. It always sounds rude saying that company's name.
Be quiet,
I'm so acutely aware of that.
be quiet. Vamos passar já.
Liquid cooling. So we previously reviewed the series. We liked it. It's a good case. The whole point of the case is that it can present a PC as sort of an old...
Este tipo de caixas vai aparecer, eu vou mostrar depois também num vídeo.
The box at the bottom that Be Quiet showed at COMPUTEX is a mock-up. The company is looking for consumer feedback on whether such a thing would even be desirable, so you can leave your comments below. They actually are going to read them. And basically, it stands the case up and routes the cable through the lower channel that it creates. Now, to us, this seems like it's trying to make the case do more than it really needs to do. It's already a good case. It definitely makes it a lot larger, but it's more of a personal preference rather than...
Caixa pequena, gostei muito, muito.
The next section was more our speed. Be Quiet also had updated liquid coolers, the Pure Loop 3 without LED,
Sei os deles.
and the Pure Loop LX with LEDs.
Esta é a parte que ele não gostou muito, porque focaram-se nos LEDzinhos.
40mm and 360mm. The LX uses a removable pump.
O que importa aqui é a eficiência do I/O, não é os LEDs, mas enfim.
Masking to illuminate different covers. Be Quiet said that the goal was to make something cheaper than a display. The company told us that it may release files and templates in the future to allow users to create their own mask and cut it. We're not sure how big a market is for a screen like this. I guess you could let us know, but we bet most of our audience is performance focused first, and unfortunately we didn't get performance details here. The non-LX version of the Pure Loop 3 drops LEDs and goes cheaper at $95 to the 240 model. The cooler is otherwise the same as the LX from what we were told, just without LEDs and with a lower price. They both move the pump into the block and out of the tubes, which is no longer a worry as ASIC's patent protection has expired. Arctic is up next. We actually met with Arctic's CEO to talk about tariffs in a...
Arctic é complicado também.
The main thing that they were showing off was a case. Arctic hasn't made a serious push in cases in a very long time. Somewhere around 10.
É, mas eu acho que tem mais algumas coisas que depois vou mostrar nos vídeos.
The Extender, which is one hell of a name. It sounds like something you'd see in a...
Gamers Nexus, pá, está cada vez mais...
The Arctic Extender is a gigantic rectangular box. The Extender goes for glass front and side.
Dá para ver as dedadas, por isso é que eu não gosto.
The case has support for two 420mm radiators, according to Arctic, and uses a glass front and side. The bottom is fully enclosed in steel, including the actual bottom of the case, with the power supply sitting on bumpers internally to try and get it some distance from the floor to get it some access to air, although it'll be coming from elsewhere within the chassis and not from outside. The case can fit two fans in the rear, plus side and top mounts. There's no intake in the bottom or the front, and the case also has an illuminated power supply plate. We'll reserve further judgment and opinion on this for if we review it. Up next is MSI. This one was a field report that we filmed, so we'll drop it in here. This is a
MSI tem muita coisa. Gostei de muitas das caixas. Esta caixa...
No, absolutely not.
Seria porreiro. Seria.
This actually comes out completely, and it brings with it the back of the case. Where
É, esse pormenor é muito, muito importante.
management's done in here. So this is basically the chassis of the case, and then it can be used as a test bench separately. It has the 4 feet to go with it. So they're kind of playing around with that. The whole thing can rotate with a couple screws 90 degrees, and it can go the whole circle. So you can end up with 4 different orientations of this, and there should be clearance on all sides for the GPU, which is why they're center mounting it. Then on each side of this, there's 2 360 mounts where they currently have screens. They call these Vision 12 lights for some reason, or Vision Light 12s or something. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. The names are fluid. But you can fit 360s there.
Só não gostei das ventoinhas parecerem que estão descentradas. Não estão descentradas, não é? Mas...
Disappointing, I'll be honest, when they told me it wasn't included, because
E pelos bichos não aparecem incluídas.
kind of specialized fans. So
E custa $600.
probably before tariffs, we're not 100% sure. The feet and top of the case, this is aluminum, so that's an expensive piece.
É.
And then up on top of the aluminum, on the top of the case, you'll see a gold-colored sort of grill that's punched.
Mas a caixa esteticamente é muito top. Mas
Even though it's got these huge fans on the bottom, I mean, they'll brute force some amount of cooling into it, but it is still, there's only intake is at the very bottom, which is pretty distant from these fans, and the whole side, it's all this decorative paneling. So it's purely a showpiece case. For the boards, this board itself is not new, but what is these, the
é,
of protruding legs here. So
acho muito bem.
in paste.
Quantas vezes me piquei nos contactos ali.
Pin and paste is different from SMT. Normally we filmed like SMT lines, which is surface mount technology. And for SMT lines, they have pick and place machines. They pump down a ton of small components, send the board through the line, and send it over like solder.
É muito interessante essa tecnologia.
So this is a different process. I'm not familiar with it or how it works, but basically it's just getting rid of any of the protruding parts, except for things like screws, and then they've still got caps and MLCCs and stuff like that, controllers, things like that are still sticking out, but not...
E acho que tem outra tecnologia também, não é? Ou não é nesta? Não, não é nesta. É nesta borda. Tem coisas interessantes.
All the fan connectors away from the right spots. And I'm going to give them credit. This is a really small attention to detail thing, but the reason was when they put them...
Aquilo que aconteceu ao Gamers Nexus também já me aconteceu a mim, que é picar-nos nos conectores.
I would make fun of that mercilessly and say, wow, how do you know when you've run out of ideas for how to market your motherboard? But I'm not going to make fun of it and say that because I have done that.
Yeah.
Definitely been stabbed several times by releasing those slots, so credit to them for that. The actually interesting thing about this board is that it's an M-Power board, so they're bringing back this branding. It's been a long time. This is a B-Series M-Power board. This is a B850, and they're going with a...
É para fazer concorrência à Apex da ASUS.
It doesn't have an active fan or anything, doesn't really need it. Massive heat sinks here. It's not finned the way you'd want to see diced like that for, you know, for like the highest performing heatsink, but they do have a good amount of surface area punched through across the other way, which you can kind of see here. And then otherwise it fits 4 M.2 devices. So this micro ATX board does 2 Gen 5, 2 Gen 4. They shove a couple of them in here. There's one that goes there. And then on the backside, there's another one that can socket right there. This does not have a price yet. They say it's supposed to be price competitive. Apparently it's supposed to compete with the Asus Apex board.
Pois.
And one of the things that the Apex boards do that this is also doing...
Não sei se vai competir no preço.
That gives you 1 DPC, 1 DIMM per channel, and that helps significantly with memory overclocking for people who are memory enthusiasts. And part of the reason is just eliminating the complexity of the extra slots. You get everything closer. All the trace routes are shorter, and they can just run the 2 for maximum memory tuning potential. Top PC is still working on an overclock for that. He's one of the world's leading memory overclockers. He works for MSI, so he's still working on that. But that's kind of what they're doing. They're targeting the Apex, basically. This is MSI's fuck you to Asus.
É, mas isso é uma borda para cima dos 500 euros.
That is the biggest key here, because MSI says because this is B850, it should be more price competitive than the 870 boards without sacrificing too much, they say. And they also have another case that I wasn't too fond of, so we'll skip that one. But this one is the Maestro case. It's the Maestro 900L. As for the other case that I didn't particularly care for, that is called the 130RPZ. And finally, we ran around the show floor at the end of the show to collect additional footage. So while the the other companies on the final interviews and discussions with a display on it. The rep at the booth didn't know many details, unfortunately. So all we really know is that it has a digital display with RPM and temperature. Zalman had a modernized throwback to its old spiral copper coolers with its new ZET3, 4, and 5 coolers. These circular coolers will be less effective than more modern shapes, but try to integrate a
Zalman.
Okay cooling in theory. We'd have to test them to know if they're any good. Colorful had its Neptune PC on site. The strange semi-open
gostei desta apresentação.
Into a case, presenting the GPU vertically and on a riser with RAM protruding from the
Neptune.
that covers the motherboard. And finally, this one is a field report from Sparkle at COMPUTEX, where we did a teardown of some of their GPUs.
Sparkle, umas gráficas da Intel.
All used G21 silicon, but it was the Pro Series card. And then the other one was their new, not yet out, Luna Rock OC B5.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got 3 cards here.
Só consigo isso aqui ela abrir a gráfica. Se quiserem depois ver, vejam aqui no vídeo dele, que é para a gente também lhe dar views, não é? É interessante. Eu depois, como eu já disse, depois vamos fazer um vídeo que também vou legendar, especialmente com as opções de que é que vamos falar. Eu vou tentar juntar, não sei se vou conseguir juntar ou por marcas ou por temas, tipo IOs, caixas, placas gráficas. Não sei como é que eu vou conseguir. Ou então vou juntar 2 ou 3 vídeos, são de vários youtubers também, e vou comentar assim consoante eles vão apresentando. Acho que será melhor, porque são, não sei, uns 20 ou 30 vídeos, ok? Vamos ver como é que vai ser. E pronto, ficamos então por aqui. Este é o resumo, é o primeiro episódio deste resumo da Taipei de 2020.